evening, and I would reconvene our meeting on November 13th, a continuation from our meeting on November 5th, I think it was. Yes, Monday,
Yes.
November 5th. When we last left off, we were discussing economic development. We will be implementing a couple of changes for tonight's meeting as we move into the energy segment. I'm going to limit board members' time and the public's time. If you have a question, that's fine. If you have a recommendation for a change, rather than make it in the form of a motion, we will see if there is consensus for it, and then move forward. They will, the planning department will be keeping track of these. If you have, again, recommendation for an addition to the plan, that would also, we would also do that in the form of consensus at this point. I am hoping to move through several chapters here this evening if possible. We're going to go until 7:30. And there is no way that we're going to finish this by our meeting on the 20th or finish it up at the 20th. So we are looking at getting into January because the budget will be taking priority over this, and then we'll hit this pretty hard in January to try to finish this up. I think we only have a 120-day calendar from the first meeting to get this adopted. So we certainly don't want that clock to run out on us, and I don't see that happening. So having said that, I want to turn it over to the Planning Commission to talk about the energy section.
Do you want to talk about the economic development?
Yes, let's just talk about that. Would you pass that out to the board?
What we realized after the last meeting was that there were a lot of statements made, but it was hard to figure out where there was any consensus of anything. And so what we did is we took some of our notes and we tried to figure out if something was mentioned more than once. We tried to, put that in there. One of the things there was a lot of time that we spent on the big box, the provision with regard to the 65,000 square foot, et cetera. And I think that it kind of got more to the point of should things be advisory, and there were a couple of times where zoning ordinances were talked about, proposed changes, and the conversation became less of should this be done or not, but more of can you make that decision at this point? And so in a way, in an attempt to address that, and this may or may not work for folks, so this is put out there, is that there would be language added to the plan that clarifies that all proposed ordinance changes would occur through a zoning ordinance rewrite, which would include the Planning Commission and Select Board public hearings and approval. I should have approvals on that. So to clarify that the town plan could say removal of a provision of something in the ordinance, but that change would actually still be occurring through a zoning ordinance, and it may or may not occur during that normal process. The other things that were talked about, there was a couple of discussions with regard to taxes and the tax burdens and the relationship of that with economic development. And we were proposing adding language that clarifies, and actually, David, this is your language, which is economic development is needed to ensure that there are adequate revenues to fund municipal services. Charges should be tailored to users of resources being able to generate adequate revenue for continued operations. Basically tying all of economic development in that chapter actually back to the taxes and the tax levy. So that as opposed to just talking maybe about taxes, but acknowledging that everything in that chapter is impacting taxes, either in a positive or a negative manner. So we present those as options for your discussion, consensus, if you like that. I think we'll be coming again. We'll continue to have, the board will continue to have discussions, and I think there'll probably be maybe a discussion of if something is in the town plan and it's written as a statement, kind of a statement of fact. You know, does that necessarily mean it's going to happen or not? You know, if there's a recommendation is in there, but it requires, you know, budget behind it, that doesn't necessarily mean that. I just saw you, your beard's getting bigger. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen because the budget needs to come behind it. But at the same time, we're trying to not be too wishy-washy, so that, because otherwise you can move to where everything in the town plan is a suggestion as well, and I don't think, you know, so everything that's recommended in here still has the process for implementation that has to occur, and it may or may not, recommendations in here may or may not come to fruition because the particular item may or may not make it through the implementation process. Does that make sense?
Let me, can I just actually, no, go on.
No, go ahead.
So not every recommendation or action step in the plan results in a change to the budget or a change in the ordinances of the town, but some do. And so in each of the instances where another rule has to be changed or another document has to be changed or whether the budget has to be changed, there are further processes of review. So the select board and town meeting are going to adopt a budget every year for the life of the plan. So every item that's identified that could have a budgetary impact in the plan gets reviewed every year by those bodies that are going to approve a budget. Similarly, any suggested recommendation for a change to the existing ordinances are going to have to go through the standard process for an ordinance review or ordinance rewrite, which means that there'll be, you know, subsequent public hearings and a process identified to do that. But in other instances, so for example in the education chapter or something similar where the town has a sort of a fairly loose kind of role in the provision of those services, there are recommendations and there are goals, but there's very little that's binding on the town in terms of budgetary impact or changing of rules. In terms of trying to draft language in the town plan that's consistent and makes it readable, we refer to all of these things as recommendations and goals, and so that's why we've used consistent language in the plan. But you know what the steps are for actually making a rule change or making a budgetary commitment.
Dora?
Agree on all that, that's true, but if it's in the town plan, it's going to be used in Act 250. So just saying, I mean, this is more a political statement saying, don't worry if it's in the town plan because it still has to go through all the hoops and the bells and whistles and hoops that to get it go through. But if it's in the town plan, it still is there in the legal document that is used in Act 250.
In any subsequent Act 250 hearing, from the point where the town plan's adopted, the first thing that you need to remember is that the Environmental Commission and any appeal court would acknowledge that the town plan's just been adopted and a reasonable period of time needs to be allowed for the revision of the land use regulations. Where the land use regulations finally are changed and they're not consistent with the way the town plan is adopted, then an amendment to the town plan would also be required so that there is consistency between land use regulations and the town plan, and the Planning Commission is fully aware of that. So in an ideal world from the Planning Commission standpoint, there'll be very little difference between what the Planning Commission is recommending for land use in this instance and the revised zoning and subdivision regulations. But where there is a significant gap between those final documents and the town plan as it stands, then an amendment will be made to the town plan,
Right, at
as
some-
it was the last time.
Right. At some point, if it goes through the process and the elimination of the language on the economic impact study for the 65,000 square feet or more, and that is maintained, then the town plan should be amended.
Right. And you could imagine that it would simply say that the matter was discussed and settled in favour of leaving it as is.
And part of the reason, I think that, one of the reasons I think that this is good is because, well, first of all, it acknowledges, the bigger question that happened at the last meeting was, well, if we approve this, does this override ordinances? And this clearly answers that. The other thing is that the main thing that I think of when you're looking at both the town plan, this board's set of goals, and our budget, is that there is a desire for an overhaul of our zoning ordinances.
I don't have any problem with this language.
No,
I mean,
I'm
this-
addressing
this
the
sort
fact
of-
that you're saying, well, this is just political to kind of pacify, and what I'm trying to say is, I think it's trying to say, this is where we're at right now, these are the steps that have to occur next, and then, if necessary, the plan is amended again.
Yeah.
I think it's not trying to appease, it's trying to acknowledge the process.
Right.
David?
I don't want to repeat what I said last time. I have some concerns about this language that's been proposed. I continue to believe that if we vote in favor of a town plan that includes specific zoning ordinance and land use related amendments referenced in it, that we are in essence endorsing those changes to the land use laws in the town, and noting that there will be ongoing process for rewriting the zoning ordinance doesn't address my concern. I continue to feel that these zoning related proposed amendments need to be advisory very specifically, and I don't think that language accomplishes that. I understand why the two of you are proposing it. I just don't agree.
Well, it's your decision, so, it's up to the board.
I don't really need to have more of that discussion now. I think we should move through chapters of the town plan.
Yeah.
This becomes an overriding issue that we're gonna have to deal with later on. I don't want to spend a lot of time dealing with that today.
I
I
agree.
agree.
Energy.
Okay. I'm Elizabeth McLaughlin. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Planning Commission. I just have a couple of introductory remarks about the energy chapter to get us going. This chapter focuses on energy conservation, efficiency, and renewable energy sources. And one of the things we talk about is exploring alternative financing programs to promote renewable energy. There's a description of the town's longstanding efforts within the community to improve municipal and school district efficiencies and various conservation efforts, such as converting the streetlights to LED fixtures. But most importantly, the plan this chapter is a link between land use and energy consumption, because there's a relationship between supporting smart growth principles and slowing energy consumption. And so I think you'll see that in any review of the chapter.
Questions by the board?
Questions or suggestions? I'm not sure
Well,
exactly.
if you have a question, if you have a suggestion,
Make it a motion.
well, I don't want to really make it a motion at this point. See if there's consensus for a change or an addition.
If the board would like, staff can take notes during this discussion, and then before going on to the next chapter, we can put those forward and see if there's consensus on the individual ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of rather just have a discussion as opposed to saying, because I brought up a lot of issues last time. I didn't necessarily make a motion to change language because I was just bringing up issues and concerns. I would guess that, we're going to have later meetings where we can make
Well,
changes.
I would prefer that we do it as we go along rather than have
I mean, if there's agreement on things, I mean, if people are
Well,
sort of saying
and that's what we're looking for is consensus. So I think we actually did too much talking and not enough action-orientated, and I was as guilty of that as anyone else. So I'm trying to expedite our time in the most efficient manner. So Christopher, you had the floor there.
Oh, okay, thanks. I'd like to just have a very short paragraph or even just a single sentence that
And please reference a page that you're talking from.
in the introduction on page 23, and I would put, I guess I'd put this right right after the first paragraph on page 24, something that acknowledges that the energy situation in which we are living now is very dynamic. There's a great deal of change going on right now. We've got natural gas production is poised to change energy markets and their customers with cheap and abundant supply. Brattleboro, that would be a semicolon, Brattleboro may find itself harvesting compost to create a methane source in anticipation of exhausting the landfill source. We are implementing net electric metering following the enabling legislation, and the nuclear power plant's certificate of public good continues to be in federal litigation. Those are all very important factors that are going to affect Brattleboro's energy use and its development, or its economic health. And I'd like to put that in as a matter of perspective that I think is desirable to have in a document like this.
How does, is there support for that, or is there a consensus to support Christopher's?
I think there's a lot of different things in here. Speaking to a lot of different energy sources, I'm not sure we need to add more language.
Ken? How do you feel? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I wish there was a way to condense it maybe a little bit.
Can you work on maybe?
Yeah, I can do that. I can
Okay.
propose something and get it to whom by what time.
Well, we still have time, so we'll give you,
Yeah.
we have a couple of meetings left.
Okay, so just as a matter of process, who should I give it to? Should I give it to Barb or to
Yeah,
you
give
or
it,
to
give it to
Jan?
Barb, and we'll get it
Okay.
concise, and then we'll.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a question on page 30 for you.
And then it'll be distributed for
Yes,
consideration?
yeah.
Page 30, did you say?
Page 30, yeah, halfway down, I need you to explain citing renewable energy and local impacts, and then the paragraph below that where it says the solar panels become more popular. Could you read that and go through that and what you're talking, what that is intended to do?
Oh, okay, so you want me to read it first and then talk to it? Okay. As solar panels become more popular, the risk of development on abutting parcels that could shade and reduce the performance of neighbouring panels will increase. Amendments to the zoning ordinance should include provision to ensure the permits address the impact of shading existing and potential solar panel locations on abutting parcels. So, as you know, for very small solar panel arrays around about the size of the one on Western Avenue, which is less than 10 kilowatts, we don't have any siting overview, but the applicant to the Public Service Department is required to inform the municipality that they're applying to the Public Service Board for a permit. And already in the past year or so, we've had complaints or requests for clarification from residents concerning both aspects of this problem. One was somebody has just built an accessory structure in their rear yard, and it now shades my solar panels, which are on my roof. How does this really work? Do I own the airspace above my house and such that I can make a claim that says, you know, your decision to construct that structure in your backyard has now limited my ability to get use of my property? And we've had it in the other opposite direction, where somebody has installed solar panels legally, but they've created a nuisance through glare and just their presence to an abutter. And the state law is silent on this question. So what we're trying to do here with this statement is to actually identify the problem at the beginning, which is as people install more and more solar panels, it's going to work both ways. There are going to be people who are aggravated because the solar panels they just installed are now being shaded by neighbors' actions, which are perfectly legal. And we're going to have the other one, which is somebody's just installed solar panels, which is perfectly legal, and it's now aggravating me for glare or for other reasons. And there's no easy way for us to do this, so it's exploratory, but it's a way of trying to identify the extent of the concern. The rough approach would be to do something like identify building envelopes on an existing parcel or something similar, and take into account what could be the potential for shadowing or for glare. And there are GIS-based tools that are fairly well established to do that. Then the next point would be for new development, for new subdivisions, both commercial and residential. There would be a hope that the layout of the subdivision would be sensitive to passive solar gain, and the parcels would be arranged in such a way that each parcel would have open access to the sun, so that solar panels could be a worthwhile installation. And the last part about this is there's a move sort of for neighborhood level solar panel arrays, fairly large panels that feed in, that many people in a neighborhood share the cost of installing, and that's net metered for the neighborhood. And so that would also present siting challenges. So it's simply to identify that as it becomes more commonplace, we are expecting to have more basic kind of inquiries in the office dealing with that problem.
It's kind of like the chicken thing.
Well, for better or for worse, the chicken thing seems to have subsided, but yeah, very similar. Chickens are great in theory, and then in practice it's a little bit different.
David?
We went to a planning conference in Vermont where that's becoming a concern
Right.
throughout the state.
And the state has actually appointed a committee to review the siting issues associated with not just solar panels, but wind turbines. In fact, Jim Mateo is on that. The former executive director of Wyndham Regional is on that siting committee, and so they're aware now that there's a whole bunch of issues associated with this.
David?
I'm not in favor of this language as currently drafted. I think that it tends to endorse the notion that if one person puts up solar panels on their property, the next door neighbor is then going to be burdened with a limitation on development on their property because the next door neighbor erected solar panels. And I don't think that that's an appropriate limitation. I think that while we may want to encourage development of solar producing arrays, I don't think that it's fair without notice or without opportunity to be heard by the landowner whose property is being burdened, that something that happens next door will wind up burdening their property in that manner. So my preference would be that this language be changed and amended so that it reads, amendments to the zoning ordinance should be considered to address the impact of shading of potential solar panel locations on abutting properties. Essentially what we heard a number of months ago was that the Development Review Board and the Select Board don't have the ability to regulate where solar panels are going to be placed. So we're going to allow landowners to place solar panels, or we don't have any control over where landowners place their solar panels, and we're thinking about adding language now to the zoning ordinance, or to the town plan to be added to the zoning ordinance, saying, well, the next door neighbor now is burdened by those panels as well, and their ability to use their property is limited as a result, and I'm not in favor of that.
I would agree with that. Anyone else? Dora?
I'm fine with that. This goes back to the whole advisory thing again. I mean, I see where Rod's coming from, and even though we don't really have any control over that, it's again, if it's in our town plan and we have some zoning ordinances, then it can be used in a hearing, even if it's not our own development review board. But if we don't have it at all, then it's not a consideration, and abutters or the property owner don't have the right to sort of, go get contradictory, information and decisions from the Public Service Board. So I'm fine with it, but I think we need to go back to the whole advisory thing again.
I think all it's doing is flagging the increasing popularity of solar panels as something that has to be thought of and potentially mitigated against. And so that's all it's really asking for. It's not making a statement for or against. It's just an observation that we're already receiving, inquiries in the office that raise questions, and currently it's not something that we can regulate. So at all. At the scale that we're talking about. So it's also looking forward to an expectation that there may well be time in the future that the state considers that appropriate criteria need to be included in a zoning ordinance to actually do a review of for locating solar arrays. That's all. It's not, I don't think it holds the town or the planning commission or anyone to a particular outcome. It's just an investigative thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as is. It's advisory. It doesn't.
Yep.
Maybe it's just the word should.
Yep.
I think we can change the word should, and it becomes a totally different thing.
Right.
And then it becomes less prescriptive.
Yep.
But
okay with that, David?
I think it's.
No, I want broader changes, and I can make a formal motion when the time comes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Further discussion in this chapter? Dora?
I have a couple things.
Also, when you start, reference the page at your.
Well, starting with the first page, this is one of the few things in the book you can actually use numbers, because you can put in things that have goals of numbers. Sort of the larger questions I have is, should number goals be in the goals, or should they be in policies and actions? Because the goals should be sort of the loftier idea, and then the action would be taking that and creating language that would say, we want to reduce carbon emissions by 30%, and it's really more of a just sort of a policy question I have. I'm fine with the language. It's just more, because it's the only one where we have those kind of goals. Mm-hmm. And so it's really more sort of thinking about, should it be an action? And I'm
We talked about this a lot.
Did you guys talk about that in the
We did.
We did.
It was quite strong. You remember?
Yeah, I think that the Energy Committee also had a great deal of impact on this chapter, and we worked
I know
very
they
closely
did.
together. We worked back
Yeah, I
and
was
forth
actually
quite
looking
a
at
bit.
Paul too.
And some people felt very strongly that they wanted these percentages right smack up there in the goals because they wanted, they just felt very strongly about this issue and didn't want a goal that didn't have a number associated with it. They wanted it to be more real.
Yeah.
And assigning a number to it strengthened it in many members of the public and members of the Energy Committee's eyes.
And it's consistent with the whole kind of approach, this is right, Paul. I think Paul and I talked about this at
Kyoto.
length. The Kyoto Protocol,
okay,
and so
yeah.
it's really modeled on that. It's really sort of an Agenda 21 Kyoto Protocol kind of approach where the numeric targets are really the goal.
And the state energy plan,
It's-
similarly numeric.
Okay,
Right.
that's that's good enough
So
for me.
it follows that formula.
Then on page 22, there are two 333 and 335 both have the language as advocate. And advocacy is a political action, which could actually potentially put the staff in a position of contradicting a select board that could potentially instruct the staff not to do that. So I don't know, I mean, the goals, the actions are fine. I just think that they should be put in, and I have a suggestion for 335, and that is just work with boards of education and WSESU district administration to establish energy audit training program at
So you want to
such
change
and
the word
such.
advocate to work with.
Yes. But you could specifically say work with the boards of ed and WSESU, and that would, boards of ed, it means state board and local boards. And then it's still the same thing, but it's not, it's not advocating, and it just is saying that's,
So you
and
could, on the first one, instead of advocate, you could say work for.
yeah.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. It's just when I was reading through this, it just occurred to me that when you're talking about that, that's really a political action, and you don't want to have that kind of action in you. And it's also not measurable. So you kind of want something that you can say, did this happen? Did it not happen? Also, and I know that partially this is because it was the Energy Committee writing it, and the 336 encouraged the town. The town plan is the town, so find ways for the town to purchase electricity from renewable sources, as opposed to saying encourage the town. Or something else, if somebody else wants to come up with other language. I just, is everybody okay with all of those? And then on 23, the first sentence of the introduction, it's just a little awkward, and I was just thinking, either adding is no exception, and Brattleboro is no exception to that, or coming up with, better language that just says Brattleboro, as is, with the rest of the U.S., the predominant source of energy is fossil fuels. It just, otherwise, I think, I think this is a really good chapter. I enjoyed reading it.
So clarify what you're asking for here.
What I'm asking for is just a little, it's really just an English thing. It's so, and I'm fine if the planning commission wants to come up with language for that. It's just, I'm suggesting that first sentence just, be a little cleaner, because it's fossil fuels are predominant sources of energy in the U.S. and Brattleboro. It's sort of like, so I was suggesting either starting off and saying, Brattleboro.
To say Brattleboro's not-
It's, yeah, I think. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No problem.
And then there was one, there's only one more thing that I had. Oh, well, actually, two more things that we include carbon harvest. On page 24, in the first paragraph, can we just clarify, some of these things were started prior to the Energy Committee being formed? And can we just make sure we're clarifying all of these things and making sure that things that actually got started by the Energy Committee got started by the Energy Committee, and then the other things are sort of attributed to Paul and his organization? Because I wasn't sure. But there's some carryover, and then there's some things that might have happened before and some things that are happening during the Energy Committee. And it's all sort of being lumped into the Energy Committee. So if somebody could look at that stuff.
Important? Why can't it just be a general statement?
Well, because if something started prior to, the Energy Committee is a relatively new committee. So if something started, before that, then it, just so that there's an understanding of how that happened. I don't, it's more of a.
I don't think it's relevant.
Yeah, I mean, my own comment there is that there's a lot of continuity between the work of Brattleboro Climate Protection and the Energy Coordinator and the existence of the Energy Committee, and it's only kind of grown in terms of the range of things that happen and the scope. So
It just might be really awkward to piece that apart.
to chunk it out.
I'm fine with that.
All right.
The only other thing I have is the carbon harvest.
Yep.
And
Where's that?
I think it appears, Dora, throughout the town plan, and I think that references to carbon harvest just need to be toned down
Yep, sure.
before this is finalized.
yes.
I mean, there's probably 8 or 10 references throughout the plan.
Yeah, I'm having trouble finding it.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's got some numbers as far as the methane. There's not even enough methane to run the greenhouses, so we should just take that out.
Right.
As far as
So
the numbers are
I think
concerned.
we agreed last time that
Yeah.
that was going to get a pretty serious review.
Anyone else?
Just smart stuff.
I have
David?
Is he?
Well, go ahead.
Is it before?
Go ahead.
That's fine. I just asked that item 322 about the PACE district be changed, so rather than saying work toward, that it says consider implementing properly assessed clean energy.
That's good.
Did you want to, Mr. Chairman, do you want to have us vote on this stuff, or is it just like?
No,
kind of
this
give us
isn't,
informal?
this isn't major. Bobby's not here, but this isn't a substantive change. This is
Good.
more grammatical, so.
Great. Great. Can I put in
I
a,
don't need to explain it.
I agree.
Everybody says it, yeah.
I caught it too.
Go ahead, Christopher.
okay, page 23, paragraph 1, 2, 3, the paragraph before the one that starts energy production distribution. Second line from the bottom of that where it says regrettably, comma. I think you meant to say not access to data was difficult, but lack of data at the municipal level makes meaningful analysis difficult. Was that better? Okay. And then on the next page, page 24, halfway down the first paragraph, these line beginning sponsor and organized workshops, I think that's just provide, not provided.
Wait, 24 where?
Page 24, first paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, says sponsor and organize workshops, comma.
You want provide, not provided.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's just, like I said, this is small stuff, but.
So, I'm so sorry.
Yep. Go ahead.
And then 2 lines down, where the line ends, established a gallery of renewable energy homes. I'd like to just have the word established preceded by the word have. So what it says is that the Energy Committee has established a gallery. It's just better grammar. And then on page 25, bullet point, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sixth bullet point beginning with the transportation sector. It says, it ends with or a 24.7%, period.
Okay,
And I think
right.
you might, you just want something like cumulative change. Just write that in. Is that okay?
Yep. We'll just, it's increased.
Or
It's-
20, or, yeah,
it's-
cumulative increase,
Yep.
whatever. Just clarify what that number is meant to say. On page 26, with table 3.2, it's the second table down, residential. Can we just say on the first line, residential units, and then 3 lines down from that, commercial units? So I had to kind of scratch my head and think, what are we talking about? 5,342 what in '05? It's just, that's what it is, it's residential units, right? Houses.
Yeah, actually, it's probably more like accounts, but yeah.
Residential accounts, that's, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Just, what is this telling
Table
us?
itself on 26. What it's actually.
And I think that's about it. Yeah, that's all I
You
have.
can have custom.
Just a little stuff. There's once an edit that says, just,
Okay?
Do you want to introduce it? Oh, hang on.
Hi, I'm Paul Cameron, Town Energy Coordinator. Just wanted to say a few words about the Energy Committee's involvement with the Energy Chapter. The Energy Committee formed a subcommittee in February 2010 to assist the Planning Department staff in writing a draft of the Energy Chapter. Myself and 4 other committee members, including Sarah Edwards, who was then a member of the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee, worked on drafts of the chapter through September 2011. We did quite a bit of work. We researched our current town plan and town plans of other Vermont communities. We had many meetings and wrote many drafts with input from Energy Committee members, members of the Town Plan Advisory Group, the Conservation Commission, the Planning Commission, and Planning Department staff. In June 2010, we organized a public event called Making Connections in partnership with the Conservation Commission, focusing on the links between energy, land use, transportation, and natural resources in the town plan. More than 40 people attended, giving input through 4 small groups. Notes from the Energy Breakout Group helped to inform the Energy Chapter. The Energy Committee feels that the Energy Chapter is a strong document that reflects a wide range of public input and expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Next chapter, agriculture.
Okay, I'm doing that, and folks, I'm sorry that I was late to the meeting. Agriculture is obviously integral to both Vermont and our town's cultural identity. When we did public outreach, much of the commentary by the public was about agriculture, and our most recent industrial growth has been in the food processing and agricultural sectors. To develop this chapter, we worked with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. We reviewed the agricultural lands in the community and where potential agricultural lands lie. And we discussed both the need to plan for existing farming operations and for possible future development of land that can be farmed. We're also trying to recognize the growing field of entrepreneurship in agricultural areas with programs like Farm to School, the co-op, CSAs, value-added products, artisanal products, which all bring revenue to that sector of our town's economy. That's all.
All set?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I usually talk so much more?
Yeah, you should give it up.
There's a reference to carbon harvest on the top of page 37.
Yeah, can I just say, we went over this, and rather than keeping on bringing it up, we need to do a sort of a search and replace. We know that.
Great.
Any other?
Has there been any study of the impact on tax revenue raised by the town of the conservation provisions that are referenced on pages 38 at the bottom, conservation easements and current use. There's a prevailing undercurrent that I regularly hear from people that taking developable land out of development increases the tax burden, which is already very steep. And I'm wondering whether there's been any assessment of the extent to which that's real, and if so, how we respond to it.
We have done that in the past because Brattleboro is also one of the few towns that the people can put their things in current use, but then there's also another, the town gives them another tax break with regard to the farm. Tax stabilization program that we do, that we continue to do.
Thank you.
And so there had been a tax stabilization program that they were done locally, then they did the current use, and most other towns got rid of the tax stabilization, we did not. But we could, those numbers were looked at probably about 4 years ago or so, and we could definitely look at those again and bring those forward to the board so that you can see the, just have, you know, what they are.
If tax stabilization and current use overlap, then maybe we should include language in here that calls for a study whether both of those programs should remain available within the town.
That would be, yeah.
Okay. I'm not aware of any tax stabilization agreements that are still in place with farms.
There is a program
Bob,
every year that's an annual program that has
Right.
been in existence for,
Right, most of those
Ever.
ran multi-year, so the last time it came up,
Right,
we did a whole bunch of them
at once.
at once.
Right.
I forget the term on that, I'd have to look at that.
Okay.
Doesn't the state reimburse for difference in current use and best use for what we lose on the property tax to parcels that are in the program, or am I incorrect about that?
I don't think it's at the full,
It's not at the,
it's not at the full
It's not a
rate. if
full
it
amount.
is.
It's not the full.
Yeah,
It's not the full interval.
no.
Okay, sorry.
So David, just to get it clear, you're suggesting that the plan should contain language that recommends the initiation of another study to look at the impact of current use and tax stabilization for agriculture.
And whether both programs should remain available in Brattleboro.
I don't believe we can get out of current use,
No, I don't think we can.
but I think the other one maybe.
Maybe.
There are contracts that are made with the town, yeah.
Right.
Other questions concerning the agriculture?
I just have a question about that. Don't you value maintaining farmland preservation?
I do value maintaining farmland. Our tax rate is above $1.20, and I think that we need to consider the impact of conservation on all the other taxpayers in town. And that's all I'm asking for, is consideration of that. Sure, I value it substantially, but we've got a completely unsustainable tax rate here in Brattleboro that I think needs to be addressed through the town plan as well as conservation.
I second that.
I don't think we're getting much more out of those properties.
I think
Ken?
my piece, I'm sorry that we moved on from the energy because it's kind of the same thing. It's the same piece for both energy and agriculture and some other ones that are coming up. And I wish we could flesh out a little bit more when we just throw out the buzzword of education. There should be more education, which is in all throughout the energy chapter, particularly in the schools. And then in the agriculture piece, it's with the farm to schools. And I don't know, I'm really happily stuck on the word aspirational, so I look at the farm to schools piece in the agriculture chapter and wish there was a little bit, I know this isn't very helpful, but a little bit more there, because the schools don't all do it equally, and there are some that do it in really a much more comprehensive way that could be inspiring to the other schools. And I kind of look at what Green Street School does and the comprehensive way they approach the farm to table stuff. And so obviously that's always going to be a focus of mine. And I'm sorry, I really, I think we should, and this seems very self-serving professionally, but also give a shout out to programs that we have in town, like an MBA for sustainable businesses that is part of approaching both agriculture and energy, especially when we're listing our assets in town. Because we have educational programs that people can sign up to in the same way that we did in the, when we talked in the other chapter about the various assets, economic assets of education in town. And we listed all the different schools. I think for some of these chapters where there are relevant degree granting or certificate granting programs, they should probably get a shout out.
Well, one of the things
That seems really obviously self-serving, but
one of the things that we focused on was the fact that we just kind of grappled with, you could be repeating numerous things in every chapter and all that interrelatedness. So
sure.
a lot of the times we had things there and we kind of whittled them down just so that it wasn't so cumbersome. But the next chapter is education.
Right.
That might be
Yeah.
a place for a lot of that.
Yeah, the MBA in sustainable energy, I think, is a little bit different though, because we are one of, there are very few areas of the country, although they're growing, where you can get such a thing. And so for both either energy or agriculture, I would think we would want to highlight that.
Yeah, I think your point's well taken.
Yeah.
Public? Education, number 5.
Well, education has a focus in the plan. I don't think statutorily it's required to have its own chapter, but due to the public participation, it has a focus as its own chapter. And there was a lot of research to the school districts and various entities in the writing of this chapter. And the demographic trends in the schools do not support any expansions, so that was identified. The plan discusses committing to working with the school districts, colleges, and other educational providers, and fostering a safe and healthy school environment, and recognizing the critical role that all these educational institutions play in Brattleboro's vitality and character and quality of life, and also the importance of early education. That's it.
Comments on the education portion?
I do.
Ken?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I actually didn't have this chapter. I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong, so now but I had perused it previously. I would really like to see something about bullying in the education chapter.
About what, I'm sorry?
About bullying in the education chapter. I was looking through a lot of town plans of a lot of other districts, and they have a section on what K through 12 needs to be doing to address bullying. And the state nominally has a commitment to that, and I would love to see Brattleboro make a commitment to that too. Again, I just feel like I'm springing things on you at the last second. But that's something that I'm seeing in a lot of other documents, and I don't think it has to be very long. Okay. But just some sort of commitment to not just the type of education we're providing, but also the climate that we're shooting for.
And this is anti-bullying you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yes. Not a how-to guide.
Nice clarification.
And then I can't search through my document word-wise, but I'm almost confident it's not here. Something about shout-outs to the diversity initiatives in high school.
Okay.
And the work that they're doing there, because not all schools have a diversity coordinator. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's important, that we show that that's a commitment that the town has as well.
Okay. Can I ask for a little guidance there, Ken? So,
yeah.
Particularly on the bullying issue, if we were to contact the supervisory union and discussed with them? I'm assuming they've got a policy.
They do.
They do. They do.
And
I know they do.
it should be lifted and
So
represented.
that would be okay.
Perfect.
That's cool.
That'd be
And then
perfect.
I'm assuming the same with the diversity stuff.
Yeah, I think in the same way that in some of the other chapters you list, okay, so this is what we have and this is what they do.
Yep.
I think, this is one of those places where Diversity Day should be in here somewhere if it's not already. I don't think it is though.
Okay.
As a resource.
Or is it something that is of note?
As a recommendation of something that the town should continue, that is committed to or has been doing and is committed to continuing.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Dora?
Well, just to connect to that, there is the resolution that the select board passed, but it's also the whole, what do they call it? It was the anti-bullying campaign, but I can't remember exactly what they were calling it, but that they were having individuals sign on to it. And, the one where it talks about, no bystanders or something like that, I can't, campaign.
Yeah.
It's not like coming to me at the moment, but it was the thing that it was. I guess it was youth services that kind of started that with the schools.
With the town.
With the town.
And the schools, then.
Right. That was
And Barb and I stood out there in gallery walk, got people
the
to sign
summer
on
of
to the thing.
2010. All right.
I think the diversity piece too could also, you could just factor in one sentence on exchange students too, because that's certainly something that we've talked about as a board and passed a resolution about, but just another commitment that the high school has that a lot of schools are phasing out.
It was the no bystander.
Is that right?
No bystander,
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No bystander pledge, that's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, it's an expense.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Barb just remembered, it's the no bystanders pledge,
That's right.
and it was what, about 3
Right.
years
And
ago?
that was the summer of 2010.
It's just
Yeah, you
so
get extra
education is as
credit
much
for
about
remembering
program
that.
and climate.
We know who did it, but we don't remember what it was.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
I'd just like to see update as of the time that we adopt this to the language about CCV and Vermont Technical College in the second full paragraph on page 47. It only refers at this point to as of May 2012.
Yes.
So hopefully that language can be updated before the thing is presented to us in final form for adoption.
And includes language from the resolution passed by the state that includes the other colleges. Because it's very much a partnership between all the colleges in the area,
Right.
not
Yes.
just those two.
Okay.
Yeah.
That will get me a pat on the back at work tomorrow.
Well, I did bring it up in
We're here for you.
in the
Okay.
economic development
Yep.
chapter.
Public?
Okay.
We are lying.
Fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Housing.
Okay. The housing chapter discusses local housing conditions and needs. The priorities are on rehabilitation and conservation of the existing housing we have in place, directing new residential developments to areas where infrastructure already exists rather than new undeveloped areas, promoting energy efficiency, universal design, and sustainable building methods, and continuing to support affordable housing. And you'll see also some background on initiatives in the affordable housing market in the chapter.
Okay.
That's all.
David?
I request that item 6.3.5 be rewritten to say consider joining the property assessment clean energy program.
Consider joining, is that what you said?
That's what I did say.
Okay, thank you. Fine with me.
I'm also going to raise here something that comes up more as we go into the land use provisions, but I think that applies here as well. I don't recall if it comes up here for the first time. We don't currently have, as part of our zoning ordinance, design standards. And we used to speak about that when I was on the Development Review Board 15 years ago, the possibility of having design standards. That would be a significant change in the way we do business. I understand the reason that the Planning Commission has suggested it, because part of the goal of the Planning Commission is to see rehabilitation and infill of development within the urban compact, if we can call it that, consistent with the current designs that we have. That may be a laudable goal, but it is and would be a very significant change. And I would, once again, when we get to that specific provision, be asking that it be aspirational rather than a determination at this point that it's the right way to go. I also noted, and again, I'm not sure if it was in this section or elsewhere, sort of a statement that there was room and ability to develop within the limits of the urban compact additional housing. And as someone who lives in town, who walks in town, who I think knows town pretty well, I have a very different view about the ability really to find additional parcels within this residential urban compact to be building into. And I question what was the basis for the conclusion that there's lots of land in town on which we could be building new houses. I mean, it seems to me that we've had a very stable, some could describe it as stagnant, but very stable housing stock in town without really a lot of development within the limits of the residential area, because there's not a lot of room to build new houses. And I'm wondering, where does the Planning Commission think that there's a lot of room for new single home development or multiple home development within the confines of the town?
Do you want to discuss this? Do you or the rest of the board want to discuss this topic specifically to housing right now, or do you want to hold it over for land use? Because we have a map that can illustrate the point made in both this chapter and the land use chapter.
I didn't want to jump ahead.
No.
I wasn't sure if it was raised here for the first time because it's a week and a half since I read it. I certainly know that it's specifically referenced in land use. I'm happy to wait till then.
Okay. I don't know if other people want to do it now. We're happy to do either or both.
No, I'm just foreshadowing for now. Literary technique.
So
Reading the
excited.
ending.
Yeah. And so how's it end,
happens
David?
next?
Just tell us how it ends. Okay.
It ends in an aspirational manner.
Cliff's notes.
I had the same question. I mean, I know that there are places, particularly closer to the urban center, where you could either build up or build out and still sort of maintain the integrity of,
So would you like us to discuss it now, or do you want to
But-
discuss it in land use? I don't mind, or both.
But if you're
Let's wait
talking,
till land use.
well, except that if it's, you know, I mean, if it's a goal, if it's an action in here or a goal,
Well, there,
it's,
I don't know what it was, that's why
I don't know, or is it just in the description?
Okay. It might be just easier to brief. Liz is going to provide some brief comments.
Thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, and then, if we want to follow it up with more detail in land use later on, we can do that.
Is that okay, Dick?
sure,
Thank you.
we're moving so far ahead of where I thought we'd be, so I might as well slow the pace
Feeling
down.
generous.
You sound very proud of us. He's very proud of us.
very proud of us.
Here, and then you can actually see brief on space.
David, I was on a committee back in the early to mid-'90s about design standards for Canal Street. Actually, there's some report with probably 2 or 3 inches of dust on it someplace
I see him.
that was somewhat interesting.
I mean, it's interesting to think about, but we don't have them now, and it'd be a big, big change.
That's right.
It's hardcore, I know.
Expensive change, too.
We sort of have them mildly for one commercial district in town already. For rural commercial, we have design guidelines, and we have design guidelines for downtown.
Well, This is just a little explanation of kind of where the planning board, how we got to where we are, with an examination of, this is buildings by use, so it shows.
So that the TV can.
It's all right, it's going
Well,
to be pretty tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is going to be tricky.
But obviously, all these dots are colored by land use categories, and you can see the downtown is, very built up. But there are areas, well, let me just continue on, that there are areas that are available for development within like the walkable downtown. But first, let me show you, this is the water, sewer, and electric facilities. So this is really one of the main components of land use plan, is to have existing development where there's infrastructure. And that's a big, tax savings and everything else, because, you don't really want to go and add new services to outlying parcels. So again, concentrate on this area here. There are areas that have water and sewer but are not developed at this time. So one of the elements that we're talking about in terms of simplifying the land use is really taking it from, let's just concentrate on the Putney Road area.
Do you want some help?
There are about, yeah. I would like to say that there are a billion little zoning districts in the Putney Road area, but there's really only about 10. And they're very, very, very specific and tailored to the Putney Road Master Plan, some individual use that was envisioned. So we've simplified this tremendously. But basically, when we're talking about building infill within the downtown area, we're talking about this area and the whole Putney Road area. And the Putney Road Master Plan does discuss the opportunity for a lot of residential use, mixed use, a variety of things. And so that's the main area. And then there's also areas in here and around here. So there are areas that meet the criteria of being within the utilities area and not currently fully built up. So in a nutshell, that's the plan, but I can show you.
With that map, if we could just do with that map for a second. Putney Road, I understand. Can you tell us which areas from the West River intersection north to exit 3 we're talking about? Because that's what we're talking about when we say Putney Road, right?
Yeah. So this area in here,
That being the cornfield?
are you talking, you want?
It's out in the corn.
We're talking the cornfield back.
Right.
No, we're talking
No, up the hill.
absolutely not the cornfield for various reasons.
Up the hill from the
But-
cornfield.
This is the marina right here, and so there's this bluff on the Connecticut River. So this has been designated as a neighborhood center and stretching as far north as sort of the existing CCV campus. And there's already planned unit development, townhouses along the river here. There's three separate areas, but there's plenty of land for further expansion. So, for instance, the parcel behind the People's Bank back office is about 6 acres, and that could accommodate upwards of 30 housing units.
To the east of the road?
Yeah, sandwich between the back of the bank and Renew
Yeah.
is a 6-acre parcel that would take at least 30 units.
Yeah.
In a fairly dense format, but so similar to Green Mountain apartments, that similar kind of density, and that's a category of housing that there is not a great supply of in Brattleboro of a recent nature.
Well, wasn't there, when we did the
You're right.
When we did the Putney Road Master Plan,
Right.
on the west side, out in those cornfields, wasn't that designed for mixed use with
Yes.
housing
So
and
this is this area here that's sort of on that high plateau.
the higher plateau?
You see it best when you're heading north on 91.
Right,
this is thought of as best developed as sort of one piece, as a PUD or as a one subdivision, because the length of the road, access road, and even some of the utilities is a reasonable distance from here back to Putney Road. The cornfield itself, which is still marked as rural, one of the issues there is that it's impacted by floodplain or flood fringe,
Yeah.
so it's actually not suitable for residential development. And it's good
agriculture.
it's extremely high quality agricultural land, which is why it's still used as a cornfield. So that calls out for a specific kind of protection. So what's different about this plan compared to the old plan and compared to the implementation of the Putney Road Master Plan is that we're calling this out as a neighbourhood centre just north of the Veterans Bridge. Then there's the other thing to be said in general, and as sort of a general response to your question, is that it's not to say that there'll be no continued residential development in more rural or more remote parts of town or other parts of town. It's just that there's an effort at encouraging development where the infrastructure, including public transit, is already widely available. So there's two other further points. One is that there's still some room to the south here, just either side of 91. And then lastly,
Where?
Basically tucked down here between, sort of at the end of Old Guildford Road, this area, sort of at the bottom of, and right now we're in a range of maybe 10 to 12 single-family dwellings or two-family dwellings being built per year in Brattleboro. And while we're obviously hoping for some increase in population and an increase in housing activity, we think that there's more than enough room inside this area, so bounded between the river and roughly 91, and then along the Route 9 corridor to accommodate substantially more than that amount of growth. And so if it was a 100% increase, we're at 20 houses a year. The proposed project up here, right on the edge of rural residential for Black Mountain Road, is when that's fully built out, that will be more than 40 units. So, there's substantial, that's just the other side of 91, but I mean, this, even with the projects that we're aware of happening inside, the urban area or the built-up area, there seems to be plenty of room to continue. Lastly, going back to Putney Road, we identify this as commercial, and that still be the case, but depending on the way that was structured, it would include mixed use as well. So there's the possibility for further housing apartments. And then the last point, a lot of the housing stock in the area to the south of downtown and to immediately to the west, the housing stock is fairly old. Some of those buildings are pretty large and have been converted into apartments, some of them not so much, and so there's potential for redevelopment of existing houses into multi-unit or to amass parcels and then redevelopment in a different format. So that would be market dependent.
That's very helpful. I think what you described didn't really mesh with what I read in the plan. Because essentially, what I've heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are areas where there could be additional development up Putney Road, out Route 9, down Old Guildford Street or whatever it's called.
Yep.
And then there could be a redevelopment of existing large buildings depending on economic conditions for multi-dwelling rather than single-family uses.
Right.
What I read here, and it's probably in the land development section rather than the housing section, really was very different. It communicated something very different. It communicated the notion that there was room for infill, the way I read it, within the urban compact. And I think it's clearly a solid goal that I'm happy to endorse, to say, let's try to have additional residential development up Putney Road, down onto, what is it called, Old Guildford Street?
Yeah.
Old Guildford Street, and in other developable areas out Route 9. I just think that language needs to be clarified wherever it was, because what was communicated by the plan itself was very different than what you just communicated to
Yeah,
us.
I think it reads, because
Okay.
I read it the same way, it reads the urban center, which doesn't connotate Putney Road.
Well, if you look at, I mean, I don't want to jump chapters, but what you're describing is on the bottom of page 117, and it does specify the areas of Putney Road development.
Right.
I think the other prong of the infill is that while you're right that there are very few open lots in what you call, what do you call it, David?
I called it the urban compact,
The urban compact.
small town.
There are a lot
downtown.
of properties where the housing on the property is either very substandard or completely inadequate. And so I don't think our vision was infill on open lots in the urban center, but that development would be preferential on these houses that are falling into themselves rather than a prefabricated unit that oozes sprawl out further.
Yeah.
So sorry to
Was
jump
kind.
ahead, but that was all.
Yeah, all right, that's fine.
I hate oozing sprawl.
Oh, yeah,
Do-
oozing sprawl.
Dora?
I don't remember where it is now about the thing about expanding the historic district, but I really like to see language in here, not just about expanding the downtown historic district, but about considering, all of our historic residential as being looked. I mean, this gets into the design standards things, because if you have a historic neighborhood, then the whole idea. I mean, a lot of what people are concerned about is the potential knockdown and rebuild of houses that are historical in character. And there's been a lot of discussion over the years about the possibility of creating, historic neighborhoods in various places where the homes are older. And I would like to see at least some language in there that says consider that.
You want it in housing? Because we've got a chapter on historic and scenic resources that we've not yet gotten to chapter 9.
I would be careful of saying all these homes in this area are historic, because there's really financial implications there of, if you have to make repairs to your home, and so there's a lot of criteria that goes along there, that if someone wants to get their home on a historic register, that should be up to them. That shouldn't be the town saying, okay, this block here, all these homes are old, therefore we're going to make this a historic district.
Right. And with all due respect, I don't think there's a block.
And I don't think so either. I mean,
No, I mean, there's individual homes, and sometimes there's a cluster, across a couple of blocks, but I can't think of a block in Brattleboro where all the homes would qualify. I think that you can distinguish interesting neighborhoods, the history of which is important, and it's good to, document that and all those kinds of things. I'm not opposed to the process of people being more aware of the history of their individual neighborhoods, like Sweetville or whatever it is. But that's different from saying that each individual home or structure still constitutes a significant historic resource. Because the threshold for that is that, under historic preservation guidelines, is actually high. And I think for the most part, most homes in Brattleboro that have got some significant historic status have been identified and recorded in that way. And so, there is such a thing as old, and there is such a thing as historic, and they're not necessarily the same thing. And there's plenty of Brattleboro
not
that's
well maintained
old.
and looking old is not historic.
Well, I just look old. That's right. So.
We would never say that out loud.
Thanks, Ken.
I think that there's something there. I just think
Yes,
it's just can't
I
be
think
worded
it's
historic.
Right. I
Just because
don't.
it has other connotations.
Okay.
No, just because it has a really specific
No, I'm
set.
here,
It comes. It's a kind of a loaded project.
think about it. Maybe we can come up with something else.
Okay.
Anything else here in this chapter?
Anything else on housing?
Yes. And please state your name, and we're going to give you about 2 minutes, and direct your questions here, and then we'll see who's going to answer.
Okay.
He is one of us, Dick.
Oh, okay.
One of,
Excuse me.
One of us.
Card carrying.
Jim Verzino, Planning Commission member, citizen obviously. A couple things that, particularly on the housing and the infill, as it relates to taxes actually, because I know that's a major issue here. Another place that we actually have a lot of good space in the, what do we call it, urban center, urban core? Is,
Urban compact.
urban
That's what I
compact.
call the urban code.
Is actually several garage-type buildings that could be either demolished or improved to become carriage houses that carry additional living units, which I think a big burden we have here is total housing cost relative to income. And anything that we can do to reduce transportation costs and spread taxes around even more units, I think will really help. So that's another area where in the urban compact we're going to actually take up land, but can put in additional housing units and get good quality housing units. Not only has been proven to be effective in getting more people in the urban core, but actually increase the housing value and increase the housing stock in terms of its quality, which we have very poor quality. But also, again, on the topic of total housing costs, I'm also on the energy committee. I was on the energy committee for the Wyndham Regional Commission for a while as well. And I can't speak as a planning commissioner here, but clearly, as a citizen, I really object to changing 6.35 of. I think the option was to change it to consider joining PACE versus joining PACE, and we talked. This got brought up on the energy chapter as well. PACE only brings down housing costs and increase housing values, and reduces total cost of housing because oil prices are only going to go up, and basically, even with compressed natural gas, it's an oil derivative. We are completely dependent on oil as an energy source for heat in this community. And it's cheaper month to month to use PACE and pay that off than it is to use oil. And if we keep going the way we go, that's only going to get worse. So I would really like to keep the language of join PACE rather than consider PACE. And I know from anybody I've talked to in the community that I've explained PACE for more than 30 seconds to, they've been in agreement. So I would like to keep 6.35 as it is.
Thank you. One thing I would tell you about the housing sector, which probably scares most developers, is that I don't think that we've had a successful land development in our community. Everyone who has started the project has not been the one who has finished the project. And I often hear about Morningside Commons and a project like that, where there is great demand for condominiums in the community, and yet I haven't seen a project like that come forward or be considered. The 40 units up on Black Mountain Road are all single family, and I'm not sure if the goal there is to try to have something in the sense of Morningside Common or not, but that's a scary thing when you have, the last one was up off of Guilford Street Extension, which went bankrupt. We had often heard conversation that we didn't have enough of high-end housing in our community to attract executives. And so that parcel was developed with that in mind, executive-type housing. And I think that there is, right now, I think there's 3 houses up there, and that person went bankrupt. And any other changes or considerations here? David?
I would just say very briefly, Jim, that we have had PACE presented to us as a board 2 or 3 times, and it's gotten a warm reception from the board a number of times, but I hesitate to adopt things as part of the town plan that we've just been considering and that we haven't yet made a decision on as a select board as a whole, and then taking a step and changing our position for purposes of the town plan, because it's something that the planning commission endorses. I think that there's a deliberative process that the select board's going through for a series of things that are included in the town plan. And I think that I don't want this town plan process to supplant the deliberative process we've been going through in trying to make that decision. And that's why in a number of areas I've been saying it should be for consideration rather than for adoption or agreement at this point. Just a difference in approach.
Other comments from the public? Other comments from the board? Next chapter. Oops, excuse me, Dora.
Well, going back to page 61, the bottom where it talks about building codes. I'm looking for a little stronger language just to say that this is definitely something that we should be looking at, not just suggesting that we should do it, because it's one of those things that I think has come up over and over again. It's also one of the select board goals and one of my goals, is the idea of building codes. So I'm not saying that we should put in here that we should do building codes, but that we should look at that we should look at definitely incorporating building codes or coming up with incentive-based programs. I mean, I think it's just a little language tweak to just make it a little more stronger.
So that would bring me back to page
Yes.
48 in the action steps, where it says develop a process to monitor land and buildings in existing neighborhoods to help identify threats to neighborhood stability and opportunities for new development. Would that to me has somewhat of a double meaning as to part and parcel to what Dora is talking about. Am I wrong?
Where are you reading?
6.1.1.
6.113, yeah.
I'm back on 48.
I'm not trying to guess it is in here.
Oh, so would you like some clarification on 6.1.1? Do you want to start at that end?
Yeah.
Or the building codes end?
Yeah, well, a little clarification
Okay.
there, because, we don't have code enforcement
No, we
anymore.
don't.
in Brattleboro.
Okay, so the basis for 6.1.1 was in discussions with the Lister's office and with the public and general outreach process early on in the plan, we became aware of isolated homes or structures and parcels that were in poor repair, to the extent where the quality of one individual residential unit was having a negative impact on the assessed value of the surrounding unit. That was sort of a rough measure. And so there's enough of those kinds of properties, not just residential but commercial also, fairly evenly distributed throughout town. So there's no one neighborhood or no one district where this is really prevalent, where the general upkeep of that property constitutes a risk for the rest of the neighborhood to some extent, and presents the town and the neighborhood with challenges. And so it was really an effort to bring together various strands of information that the town collects for a variety of purposes, and use it as a tool to actually identify neighborhoods that are experiencing some kind of fairly localized and fairly specific issue with one or two potential properties, and then take steps that the town already has at its disposal, including the health code, to either bring about some overdue maintenance or upkeep on the property, or to move it along to the next stage. So it wasn't specifically a building codes oriented action item. It was more following on from the notion of the sort of what sociologists refer to as sort of the broken window theory, that if you get more than one or two homes in a block or a neighborhood that are in very poor condition, it makes it more difficult for other people to maintain their homes or properties in good condition. And there's a lot of various social attributes that are of concern in those kinds of settings. And we've had enough experience in the last 4 to 5 years to realize that when we leave things like this unattended, they can get worse, not better. So that's the purpose behind that one. And really what we're trying to do is find ways of reinforcing or underpinning the residents or property owners that are making a long-term commitment and could do with some assistance. So that's the intention of that one. The building code's one.
I'm actually, because I forgot when I got back to the language back here that there actually was an action statement that said what I wanted it to say. So, you know, I'm fine with that. I just want to say that in reference to the whole 611, that doesn't say what you just said. And
no, it's sure.
It doesn't not say it, but it does.
Well, I mean,
and I also have to say that there's, you know, you can monitor these situations, but unless you're going to put into some kind of program where you're going to help people out fixing up their houses, or you know, that there isn't a lot, and we've had lawsuits involved with people who are saying they can do what they want with their property. So I'm not sure it makes sense I'm not sure it makes sense to have that as an action. I mean, it's certainly, you know.
It's not suggesting an ordinance change. It's not suggesting new rules. It's not suggesting a new commitment of budget, a new commitment that the budget would have to withstand. It's simply identifying how to bring mostly geographical information and knowledge that's held in the heads and the work of existing town staff and bring it together so that you can shed light on a particular issue, and we've done that successfully already in the last couple of years. So it's across all the departments. You glean a lot of information from discussing this issue from various different aspects, and sometimes some very simple outreach and identification of the problem and focusing on it produces really strong results, and we've had some extremely strong results recently.
So,
and I don't want to go into detail.
Well, no, I'm not asking for detail. What I'm thinking is what you really need more is language about coordination of information that already because you're talking about information that exists, and you're talking about taking that information and having one department use information that another department has. One that's possibly a municipal thing and not necessarily, you know, a planning thing. But if it's existing information, all you're really doing is making sure that information gets from one department to another department, and I don't know if you need, you know, I mean, like that should just be.
What we're doing is
This is just an acknowledgement of something that is going on.
And flagging an issue that we needed to respond to for some time. And it doesn't make any commitments, it's not calling for more resources or more rules. It's just using the information that we've already got and the staff that we've already got in a more effective way.
Okay.
I mean, that's why it doesn't say the things that you were hoping it would say.
Okay. Any other questions here?
Yep.
Transportation. Let's go.
This chapter was written in acknowledgement that Brattleboro is a regional center with significant warehousing and transportation activity, and it's important to maintain these transportation links and intermodal links to the region. And at the same time, we felt that it was important to preserve traditional pedestrian-oriented downtown and safe local streets. And there was a lot of consideration of the Complete Streets Bill and a lot of public input regarding various walking and biking users, as well as, public transit users. And so we worked a lot with the Healthy Communities Coalition and a lot of public input to discuss not only major roadways and traffic calming, but also bike lanes and so forth.
questions?
I love this first page. That's all I have for that. I really,
Thanks, Ken.
I really appreciate the tone of the first page and the goals, and I think it's great. And a little bit of the second page too, but mostly the first page.
Just a little bit of the second page?
Well, no, I just, sure, the first 2 pages, but
Great, thanks.
it's well done.
Dora?
714,
Yeah. I'm just looking at the
reference
same
to
thing.
illumination.
Yes?
What this reads is that all public streets, and there's a lot of public roads and streets that don't need lighting. I would be concerned that that would sort of become something that says all public streets, because we have a lot of excessive lighting on a lot of our roads as well. I kind of get at some of the things that you're talking about, because you're talking, it gets to our lighting standards and all that. But the way it reads is that you're installing lights on all public roads, and it's.
Well, it says proper design and illumination levels, and illumination levels in rural areas could be 0.
How about if we said adequate but not excessive?
Yes.
Yeah, because, one of the things through the budget process the past several years, we have talked about reducing, even in the heavier urban areas of the downtown area, that people would and appreciate not having streetlights on their street. So I think this is somewhat, David?
I'm gonna say from personal experience that the new LED lights are way brighter than the prior lights, even at the lowest intensity. They do not have screens apparently available, and the new LED light that's been put on my street corner is making it impossible to sleep in my house. And I know that it's cheaper, but the technology is not refined enough at this point, and it is negatively impacting my use and enjoyment of my house. And I haven't had a good night's sleep in 2 weeks since they put those lights up.
When did they put it? Because I haven't seen it.
And I've been dealing with Public Works, and Green Mountain Power's trying to help, but I will just note, as we move forward with this LED project, that people who live near these lights are going to be negatively impacted, because there aren't adequate screens at this point, from what I can tell.
They haven't adjusted the angle?
They say that they don't want to adjust the angle because they're installed a certain way. It's problematic. That's all I can tell you.
I'm telling you, I've been walking under those lights on Myrtle for months, and they are way too bright.
It's like daytime outside. I would ask on page 68 that the reference to the Stark Road Bridge be removed, since I think that was replaced after Irene. So it's not on the list anymore. I would also ask that, I'm sorry for that diversion.
It explains a lot.
I totally agree with you.
It's terrible. I would also ask that on page 74, under bicycle access conditions, Putney Road, I would ask that a line item be added saying that a condition that is making it unsafe is that failure by the state timely to maintain striping.
I'm sorry.
This would be under Putney Road into the 4 bulleted items.
Oh, okay.
It should stay, I would ask that it say failure by the state timely to maintain the striping. They put the bicycle lanes in the middle of the travel lanes, and then they're not maintaining them, and it's not safe.
I have one more thing.
One more.
Back on page 64 in the actions, 723. Let's remember that lay people are reading this, and not everybody knows what is meant by bicycle storage. So can we have a little more descriptive language, just to say that it's meant to store, because it could be.
Is this a trick question?
Yes, it is a trick question. I mean,
Where are you?
Okay.
7.23.
7.2.3, yeah.
64.
Okay.
I mean, bicycle storage could mean having a place to put a bike, you know, for long term, and that's not
Oh.
what it's meant by it.
You want increased bike racks.
Or, yeah, or whatever, you know, I mean,
But I thought I read that someplace else in here.
well, it is in more descriptive, but it's they have an action as well, so,
Okay. So you want to use something like racks, which makes it obvious.
yes.
Okay, that's cool. That's good.
I would actually, on page 64, I would strike Beeline. I would support the bus service operated by Connecticut River Transit.
Yes, actually, I'm not sure that they still use the bus, but I think,
Beeline.
are they in a
They're probably
transition to
gonna
just
change it.
Connecticut River Transit? What?
They're still calling it, I think, Beeline right now, but they may change it. It's probably a good idea just not to have that in there.
Okay. So just, okay,
That way you don't have to change it when they change it.
okay.
Well, and actually, because they're also operating more than just the Beeline too.
Yep.
Public comment on transportation? Seeing none, number 8,
One more.
one more.
70.
You said last time.
I know,
thought you said one
I
more.
just realized I have
So this
one
is
more
your
little,
last
this
one
is a
more.
minor thing.
You're up next.
This is a minor thing on page 70 in the middle under regional bus connections. White River Junction Hanover exist but are not timed so as to allow efficient travel for either riders or occasional riders. I think we mean commuters. Or regular riders.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're in the intercity bus here?
We're on regional bus,
Oh,
yes.
regional bus.
Regional bus.
Okay.
Because it says for either riders or occasional riders, so you're sort of, you know,
Oh, okay. Either commuters or occasional
yeah,
riders.
commuters are,
Yep, good catch. I should draw your attention to the intercity bus section. I need to fact check that. It seems like we may. There's speculation as to whether we've still got the Greyhound service and if we have, for how long. The state's paid it through December, but I don't think anyone's pretending that it's going to continue past December. Not sure.
Check with Matt Miller on that,
Yeah.
because I thought that was,
we were just talking about it yesterday in the Transportation Committee meeting, and he didn't indicate that
It's about to go
it was
away.
about to go away.
I don't think there was there was additional resolution that
Oh,
has
okay.
continued it for an extended period of time, but it will continue to come up as a possibility of losing that service, which would be an issue for the town.
And it
Yeah,
takes more than
maybe-
24 hours to get
Um,
from Boston to here on the
I mean,
Greyhound bus.
Maybe what really needs to be added to this is something about the need for intercity. You know.
Yeah, so I'm open to editing that.
Okay. Because even if we continue with the Greyhound, it's not not enough.
It's not adequate.
I'm Lee White from Brattleboro, and I'm part of the Healthy Communities Coalition and a public health nurse. And I don't know if it's necessary for me to speak in support of this chapter, but I'm very pleased that there's a lot about improving infrastructure for bicyclists and pedestrians so that people can be active in their transportation rather than relying so much on cars. And I just think it's hugely important that this is a part of the town plan and this is a direction we want to move in. So I applaud the
Definitely.
planning commission and staff for creating a great transportation chapter.
Thank you for your comments. Arts and cultural resources, number 8.
Okay. Arts were, as you might imagine, a theme that came back to the committee repeatedly as we engaged the public in this process. We wrote the chapter in close collaboration with the Town Arts Committee. As a matter of fact, I went to one of their meetings where we went over it in detail. and brought it back and changed some things so it was more to their liking. We discussed the positive contribution arts and culture bring to our quality of life in Brattleboro, the role of the creative sector in driving economic activity, especially new economic activity, how to maintain Brattleboro's well-deserved reputation as an arts community, and how to ensure access to future cultural events and educational opportunities. We tried to figure out how to encourage enhancing the organizational capacity of local arts and cultural entities, producers and retailers, to ensure that everybody continues to support each other and receive support. And we wanted to recognize the opportunity, the many opportunities that exist in Brattleboro for public art, which seem to be very well received by community members.
All right. I had a brief discussion with Rod here on the goals and number C. Build an administrative and financial structure to support community arts endeavors and greater youth involvement. And I think you were going to work on a little bit of clarity there in that
Right.
language.
Right. Yeah, the goal is really intended to be a call out to the arts community as it exists. So it's not offering or asking for an increase in the administrative or financial support from the town to the sector. It's an aspirational goal, to use a term of David's, for the arts community itself.
They brought this up at their meeting that I attended, and I think what they envisioned, Dick, is the maintenance of a directory, probably on a website, where artists can share information to understand where in the community they can go with their art, where the opportunities are.
I had the same concern that I've heard Dick express. It's both here in goal C and then in the paragraph marked administrative structure on page 80.
Yes.
And I do think that some language, and I don't know what language needs to be added, but some language needs to be added to clarify that this is not a town project
Right.
to which we're dedicating resources. And
Right.
it may just be a matter of restating C and administrative structure in some way to clarify that this is private initiative rather than town-sponsored and financed initiative.
Right. I think the arts committee sees themselves as in a role of fostering this, but that it doesn't constitute any kind of increased demands on municipal services or resources.
Well, but then down in 824, it says discuss the potential for an annual municipal
Yes.
contribution to the arts.
Yes.
And I actually would like to see that stricken because the reality is we have the Conservation Committee, we have every committee that we support, and why would the Arts Committee be any different? They're a significant part of the town, but so is every other committee that we have, the Conservation Committee and the Energy Committee. So I'm really not comfortable with that at all. Dora?
It's not saying that the Arts Committee would necessarily get the arts.
To the arts,
This has come
but,
up.
well,
This
to
has
the
come
arts.
up in big arts meetings over and over and over again about the potential. Now, we know it's not going to happen, but I think they'd like to have a discussion about it. So there's a discussion is just a discussion. It's not saying money's going there. It's not. They just want to have a discussion.
I believe that's the slippery slope. And
Well-
that's really opening the door, and I'm uncomfortable with it. For one of the things that has been the highlight of the town plan is the financial stability of the town moving forward and the affordability. So from that standpoint, I believe that the arts and many other things are assets to our community. Doesn't mean that we have the wherewithal of the affordability to say, here, we'd like to commit to that. In a perfect world where money was not an issue, yeah, it would be nice to have an arts center downtown someplace. But at this point, committing the town to something like that is not feasible. So that's why I'm not in support of that language of 824.
All we're committing the town to is a discussion.
And I prefer not to commit the town to the discussion unless it includes other sectors of our community.
Undemocratic statement.
So,
Well, if there's no consensus on this one, maybe we can make a motion when the time comes.
that's right.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Maybe we can say under number C, encourage development of an administrative and financial structure.
Yeah. Okay. That's helpful, thank you.
And then maybe, and I haven't looked carefully at this administrative structure paragraph for additional language, but maybe we can just make clear that it's the private sector. That would be doing the work.
Public?
I'm Michael Bosworth. Actually, just have a process question. I came here primarily for Chapter 12, which is a ways away, and you
We're
won't.
not going to get there in
We're
10
not gonna
minutes.
So, yeah. So my question then is, I know I won't be here next Tuesday.
And we're going to continue to Tuesday and then continue to a date specific where we'll have our next review.
And you're thinking that's likely in January because
Most likely it will be in January. I don't see it happening, but we'll have that discussion on the 20th. And, but I don't see that happening, but that's not to say that it won't. But since it'll be public,
But you definitely will not be working with Chapter 12 a week from, or on the 20th.
no, we will not.
Okay.
There being only 5 minutes left, I don't think we're going to get through the next chapter. I'd like to move to
Recess,
recess this hearing until
November 20th.
November 20th.
Actually, you don't have to recess it.
November 20th is already warned as your
November 20th is already warned. So you can
second
is the second hearing.
hearing.
Yeah.
All right, I move to adjourn.
Well, I got,
And then at your second hearing, you may then adjourn that to a specific
Yeah.
date if you're not going to
Right.
take up time at your regular select board meeting on that.
okay.
It's just as on
Yeah,
chapter
on the 20th.
2,
Well, it
on
won't be
economic
exactly.
development, last week I had mentioned a number of specific items. Shall I just articulate those on the same piece of paper?
You can, but make sure that they're circulated for the board so
I'll
we
give them to
can.
the board. Give them the board, just like I included the number 2.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, 5-0, thank you.